guys, it's Jen, and I wanted to bring you start this video a little bit differently than usual. I'm using my this week cut file, and I wanted to show you something cool and something that I intended as I was creating this file that I'm going to use on my layout today. So you can see that there's all the days of the week, and then there are these three little little connecting words, I would say, and those three are connected together, and then the days of the week are disconnected. I have the SVG file open. So when you have that SVG file, you can use that in Silhouette Designer Edition. All you need to do is turn on the cut lines. So I'm just selecting over all of the shapes, just clicking and dragging over the shapes. And then I'm going to go to my cut settings window and click on cut. And then you'll see the red lines appear, and that means that it's okay to cut. If you're opening the PNG version of the file, what you'll need to do instead is go to the trace window, click on select trace area, and drag that over the shapes, and then unclick high pass filter and choose trace, and that will give you your cut lines also. So you can see that there. I'm just going to go ahead and delete that because I know that the cut lines are already turned on for this. Now, what I'm going to talk about in this video is a routine that we've been doing every Monday. Our church has a sign up to help with cleaning the church, and so my husband has signed us up to do every Monday in October. And so I am going to use the word that says Monday, and I'm going to use the little word that says hello. So I'm going to go ahead and ungroup these three. So what you'll need to do is Control right click. Well, for me, it's Control click. I'm not using a mouse, or you can just right click if you're using a mouse, and choose ungroup, and that will make these separate. So now I have my hello and my Monday, and I'm going to connect these together. I'm going to zoom in a little bit, and just a little trick if you don't know this already, this little magnifying glass up next to the plus and the minus, it's the third one over, you can drag over an area and it will zoom in just to that area, which is nice and handy. So what I'm going to do is connect these two words. And so I'm just going to make it so that they overlap. And that way the word hello leads right into the word Monday. And if I go to the cut settings window right now, you'll see that there is a red line set to cut where that hello shape ends and the Monday begins. I don't want it to cut there. So what I need to do is weld these two words together. So I'm going to go to the modify window. I'm going to select both of my shapes and I'm going to choose weld. And that will make this into one shape. You can see it's connected here. And then if I go back to my cut settings window, there is not a red line between those words. So that's exactly what I want for the title for my layout today. And I want to make it fit across most of my layout. And so I'm just going to hold down the shift key so that will keep the proportions correct. And I'm going to just drag it until it fills almost across the whole page. And that's what I'm going to use to cut. So now I can just go to my cut settings and choose what I'm going to cut out of. Now I wanted to just mention quickly that when I am cutting something intricate or something that has thin lines, I like to slow down the cut. And that just helps it be a little bit more smooth. And so, for example, if I were to choose cardstock, I could scroll down here and come to the speed. I usually slow mine down to 2 just because I want it to just make sure that everything's good to go. So I usually slow it down to 2 and cut my more intricate cuts. So with that in mind, let's go ahead and move on to the layout. Okay, so like I mentioned, I have this photo of my daughter and she's cleaning the windows at our church. And here's my Hello Monday. I'm going to use this background paper from Bo Bunny's Modern Mist collection. And I just really like the way this reminded me of a window, the blue fading to the yellow, like the sun coming through a window. I don't know, it just worked for me. And then I just pulled some papers randomly from my stash, and this is from Pink Paisley's new line, Autumn Lane, and this is from Maggie Holmes confetti, and then this was a Scraptastic exclusive paper that I got when I was a subscriber quite a while ago. I'm going to use some vellum, and I'm going to use this stamp set from Felicity Jane. This is from the October Felicity Jane kit, but any sort of like everyday kind of stamp works for this. There's a lot of them out now, and so I'll try to link to a few options for something like that. But I'm going to use these stamps, and we're going to use stamps as embellishments today, and to add to like little bits and pieces onto the layout. So I'm going to show you a few different ways to do that, and we'll go ahead and put you on fast forward and get started with this. So I'm starting with cutting some vellum, and I'm going to put it behind my photo, and I want to stamp and emboss in white on the vellum. So I'm using my EK Success powder tool to take off any static cling that might be on the vellum, and I'm going to use that calendar stamp from Felicity Jane to go ahead and stamp that onto my vellum. And I'm going to use a Versamark pad, which has a sticky ink on it. It's just like a clear sticky ink that the embossing powder can cling to. Here I was looking for my embossing powder. I actually could not find it anywhere. I went out and bought some. Good excuse to go to the craft store. So I just ran out and got some white embossing powder because it's something I use often. I don't know what happened to it, but I couldn't find it anywhere. So I'm just stamping a pattern, and this is just going to sit behind my photo, so I'm not being too careful to be exact, but I'm stamping some vertically and some horizontally in a pattern. And you can see through the vellum, you can see the Versamark ink on it, and actually it looks really cool just as a tonal pattern like that too. So you could definitely leave it like that if you wanted something a little more subtle. But I'm going to go ahead and sprinkle my white embossing powder on here. I've got some Zing embossing powder from American Crafts. Then I'll just go ahead and take my heat tool and heat that up. While I'm doing that, I just wanted to make you aware that there are lots of tools that I use in every video almost, and if I forget to link to them below, I wanted to let you know I do have them linked over on my blog at CraftyJenScow.com. Just click on my favorite tools. I think that's what it's called, my tools or favorite tools or something like that, on the top header of my blog. So just FYI. Embossing powder is one of those things that still amazes me, and I love watching the embossing powder harden and become more opaque. I just think it's the coolest thing, and it looks really cool on vellum. You want to be sure when you're embossing on vellum to make you don't want to keep the heat tool in one place for too long because it will make the vellum curl up or burn. So you just got to be careful of that. So I'm just moving around the heat tool quite often, and you can see I've got this awesome embossed vellum pattern now, and I just love that. So now I am going to just clean off my stamp there and put it back, and I'm going to layer up some papers behind it. I want some papers to peek through behind that vellum because the awesome thing about vellum is that you can see all the layers behind it, but it just gives them a softer look. And so I'm making sure to put some layers in a way that I can get the full effect of the vellum. And so I'm using that strip of Scraptastic paper behind the photo to go kind of make a bar across the bottom. And I know that I want to use a little bit of this floral paper as well. I'm just going to use just a little tiny piece underneath the photo. I just want it to be kind of a subtle, pretty little detail. And I'm going to play around with these stamps a little bit. Like I mentioned before, this was a Monday routine, and on these stamps from Felicity Jane, there are the words routine and Monday. So I'm going to stamp out Monday routine, and I'm going to try a few different things before I decide what I want to do. And I wanted to show you how you can make embellishments out of stamps. And so that's what the main focus of the stamping in this video is. So you can definitely, I stamped the word routine in some Lagoon ink from Close to My Heart, and I punched it out with a circle, but I didn't end up loving the way it looked. So I'm going to make a little banner instead that says Monday routine. And you'll see me just playing around a little bit with a few different things before I decide on that. I find it's really useful for stamps to have some scratch paper handy, just that you don't mind stamping on and trying things out before you commit. So here's where I stamp Monday Routine, and I'm using Lagoon ink from Close to My Heart, and then that Pale Peach from Hero Arts. And I really like the way that little banner turned out. Okay, so I pulled out these stamps. This is a stamp that's one of those two-part stamps. It's a floral image. This is from Close to My Heart. I don't think it's around anymore, but I will link to some. I know Altenew has some awesome stamp sets like this where you can stamp it in a few different colors. And so I'm going to use these roses, which kind of remind me of the roses in the background of this Maggie Holmes paper. And I'm going to stamp a couple of them in a few sizes and use them as accents. So I'm going to start with the larger one, and I've got this massive block. This is the biggest block that I have, and below that one is this one, and it doesn't quite fit. So I'm going to start with that largest block, and I wish that I had a tattered rose color that was not a distress ink, but I don't, so I'm going to try it with this. And I just have some white cardstock. I'm going to move some stuff off to the side. So I'm going to ink this stamp up. If you have a brand new clear stamp, you kind of want to season it, and I do it by just rubbing it on the back of my hand because the oils from your hand will make it so the ink sticks better to the stamp. And when you're using a large stamp image like this, if you want it to look more perfect and more clear, you can use like a foam pad underneath it. So I'm going to use this. This is a Close to My Heart Versamat. Just on the back side, it has kind of a foamy cushion. But you could also use, I have this little mat from Amy Tangerine that's for poking holes and stuff. You could use that too. So I'm going to try that one more time. It doesn't look too bad, and I don't care if it's exactly perfect. If you want it to be exactly perfect, do not use distress ink. Just use a regular ink. With dye inks, they will dye the paper, and so after time, they will stick to, or they will sink into the paper and give you a more clear image. Okay, so since I'm stamping over this anyway, I don't think that the base layer matters as much. So I'm going to go ahead and move on to the top layer of this stamp. I've got stuff falling all around me. Hopefully you can't hear the laundry in the background. The laundry room's right next to my craft room, so. Okay, so now I'm using the Hero Arts Fresh Peach Mid-Tone Shadow Ink for the top layer. And because they're clear stamps, I can align these, and I'm trying to remember how this goes exactly. I know it doesn't fit exactly on here. Okay, I almost had it right. So I think that it goes, that looks really pretty. We'll stamp it on the other one. I think that this bottom piece fits onto the bottom here. And it doesn't matter if it's exact. So that looks really pretty. So I'm going to do a few more of those in some different sizes. I might try some different colors, but I might not. So I'll go ahead and put you back on fast forward. So I have to admit to you that the whole time I was stamping these flowers, I was thinking how cool it was. I just love the way that this turned out. They just look so pretty. And I'm definitely going to have to pull out this stamp set again and maybe buy a few more stamp sets like this because I love florals. That's my favorite. That's part of the reason I love Maggie Holmes so much because she always has awesome florals. So now I'm stamping the middle-sized flower, and I'm using a mixture of Hollyhock ink from Close to My Heart for the base layer, and then I'm stamping over the top with Lipstick Red from Simon Says Stamp. And this combination looks really pretty right now, but as it dries and soaks into the paper like the dye inks do, they blend together too much, so I'll end up not using those. I'm stamping the smaller flower again in the Fresh Peach color, and then I'm stamping over it in the Hollyhock ink from Close to My Heart, and that's an excellent combination. I really like the way that looks. And here's where I noticed that those two colors are blending in too much on that medium-sized flower. So I'm going to take my Tattered Rose Distress ink and stamp that one again and go over it in the Fresh Peach because I really like that combination from the large floral. And oh, it's so pretty. I just love this look. And they look, when they dry, dye inks soak into the paper and they dye it. That's why they're called a dye ink. And they spread out. And so you can almost hardly tell that they're stamped. They just look like they're printed pieces that I bought, like maybe from a Maggie Holmes die cut package or something. It's just beautiful. So here I'm going to pull out some green inks to stamp some leaves, and I've got some bottle ink from Adirondack, which is Ranger, and then I'm pulling out a pastel green ink from Prima, and that's a chalk ink, and that is a pigment ink. Pigment inks are more paint-like, and they rest on top of the paper rather than seeping into the paper and dyeing the paper, so they're more paint-like. And I really like the way that the bottle ink looks when you stamp over it. Oh, actually, that's not bottle ink. So I also pulled out Distress ink in Evergreen Bough. And the way that that looks stamped over the pale pastel green looks really cool. And because it's a painty kind of ink, it kind of lightens up the color of the Evergreen Bough ink. And I really like the effect. And so the darker leaves are the Evergreen Bough and then the bottle ink stamped over the top of them. So I hand trimmed all of those out. I saved you from watching that boring little bit. And now I am just stapling those layers together and going to adhere everything down. And then I'll get to playing with those flowers and seeing where I want to put them. You can see now that they're cut out that they really do look like they are die cuts and that I bought them, not like I made them. And I just think they're beautiful. So I'm going to put my title up at the top, and then there's a space underneath it for some journaling. I find that I kind of can let my products guide me to know where to put things. And so since there's that little space there, I knew that was the good home for my journaling. I'm just arranging the flowers and the leaves on the top left and bottom right of the photo and kind of creating diagonal clustering there. So now I am just layering up some of those flowers, putting some underneath the photo, some on top, just creating some dimensionality that way. And I'm using some of the dark leaves and some of the light leaves. And if I do say so myself, it's looking pretty freaking fantastic. I just think that those look like die cuts. They look so amazing. And so I think that you can definitely use your stamps for embellishments. So don't forget about that. You do have to do a little bit of fussy cutting. There are lots of stamp sets, though, that come with matching die sets. So look for those if you are not a fan of hand trimming things. I'm pulling out this camera stamp, and it is from a Felicity Jane kit. And I'm going to emboss it on some light blue cardstock from Simon Says Stamp. I can't remember the name of it, but I have linked to it below as well as over on my blog. And I'm just going to, like I said, emboss that with some white embossing powder. I really want to just encourage you to pull out your stamps, think of the ones you haven't used yet, and see how you can use them as embellishments on your layouts. It's something that I haven't done in a long time. I usually use them kind of as a finishing touch, just like a word or a phrase or something like that. But it's been fun to pull these out for embellishments this week. So go ahead and try that. And I'm going to go ahead and place the camera above Hello Monday. I thought about putting it in that clump of flowers on the left, but decided not to. And then I'm going to get my journaling down. So I'm using this little checkbox stamp, and instead of writing like a list, I'm just going to write my journaling next to it. So it doesn't have to be like a literal interpretation, but it just kind of is a nice little embellishment, kind of. And that's from the Felicity Jane stamp set. And I'm just attaching that Hello Monday with some adhesive, just lightly. And I'm going to stitch it down on my sewing machine to get that adhered completely. I'm just using a sewing machine that I've had for years and years since I was in junior high, a Kenmore. I just only use it for scrapbooking for the most part. And just stitched quickly across the top of that, and then I did a little bit on the left hand side of that strip of paper just to have it in another place. I'm looking through my flare to see if there's any that I want to add, and I'm going to pull out a couple from an older Maggie Holmes collection to use on this layout. I thought about using the floral to bring it up to the top so that I could have it in 3 places, but I end up not loving it. It's a little too coral compared to the colors that I used. I will use that one that says love this over and over on it, and the one that says happy. I thought about lining up a bunch of them here above Hello Monday, and I thought that was kind of cute, but I decided against it ultimately. So I'm just going to create a little cluster above the title there, and I'll use that happy flare, and I'm going to put that camera up on some foam square. So I'm going to play around with these flare just a little bit before deciding on these two. The one that says love this down at the bottom right, and then the one that says happy. So it kind of says happy Hello Monday, which is fine with me. I thought there was a little too much space at the top, so I'm just going to place a strip of paper up there, and I didn't like any of the papers that I had out, so I'm going to go through my scraps, and I found this graph paper. This is super old from a paper pad from Basic Gray, and I like the way that looks at the top a lot. And then that's a little strip of paper from an old Glitz Designs collection. And I'll just place that underneath it. It brings in the same colors, but they're different patterns. So you can use multiple patterns as long as they're kind of in the same tonality. So just stitching across the top there, and then I'm going to rough up the edge of that just to give it a little bit of extra texture and dimension. And then I will just tape the loose threads onto the back. And I'll do the same with the threads that are hanging down on that Hello Monday and from the stitching on the sides as well. And I'm pulling those threads through to the back just so that they're not hanging down in the front. Sometimes I like that look, but in this case I want a bit of a cleaner look, so I'm pulling them through to the back and then securing it with washi tape and cutting off the excess. And I'm going to rough up a few of these edges a little bit more. And then I'm going to pull out some stickers from the Maggie Holmes Shine collection. These are the glitter stickers, and I'm pulling out some of the hearts. I'm just going to put a few of those on the layout, and I like the gold element that it brings in. I'm going to end up adding a few enamel dots in a light pink color. They are an off-brand from Michaels that I got in the dollar bin, and that is pretty much going to complete the layout. I think about a few other things, but I just realized that this needs to be a little bit simpler. Oh, I do pull out a tiny little sticker from a couple actually from the Heidi. These are Heidi Swap, her memory planner line or whatever. And I put a little hint of it in the cluster of roses to the left of the photo, and then one up at the top. And I'll end up stamping the date on the top one. And then here are those enamel dots that I mentioned. And I'm just sprinkling those about. It's going to take me a minute to decide exactly how I want to sprinkle them around. I like to do clusters of 3 where 2 things are close together and one is a little bit farther from it. And so I'm going to play around with it a little bit. Then I'm going to go ahead and add some, oh, here's my date stamp. So that's a shiny sticker. So I use Stays On black ink to stamp that date. And then I put a little enamel dot up with the date as well. And here's where I'm going to just write my journaling. So I'm just writing about how our routine is to go to the church and clean it each Monday this month, and how I like that my daughter's getting in the habit of doing hard work and service and stuff like that. And I'm using my favorite black Muji pen. And then lastly, I'm going to add some drops of India ink. And that is going to complete my layout. There are some close-up photos coming up at the end. If you have any questions, be sure to leave a comment below. I've linked to all available products in the YouTube description, as well as over on my blog at CraftyJenScow.com, where I'll have more information and still photos of the layout. Thank you so much for watching. I appreciate all of you, and I hope that you're enjoying this stamping and scrapbooking series. I've loved making these first 2 videos, and I have lots of ideas for the next 8 weeks, so stick around. Thanks so much for watching, and we'll talk to you very soon. One quick thing I forgot to mention, I have some exciting news. Irit Landgraf and I have been working hard on a class that we're super excited to share with you. And I can't give you more details yet, but it's coming very soon. So stay tuned and watch for that. And I'll link to her channel below so that you can check out who she is if you're not sure. But I'm sure you do know who she is, and she's fantastic. So be watching for that. And I'm so excited. We'll see you soon. Bye-bye.